Would you like me to translate? Your ignorance?
She probably only knows how to say yo and what's up. The words fell into the air like poison, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. A sneer came next, casual, entitled, and anticipated. Zaria Monroe didn't move. She stood there with a tray in her hand, her gaze calm and her back straight. And then, she answered in perfect Parisian French. "Sir, I think you have misunderstood the situation. I think you have misinterpreted the matter, sir." The rich CEO turned slowly. His partners from other countries did also. And in that 1 second, everyone in the room stopped breathing. Welcome to Hidden Worth, where we share compelling, real black tales that were never meant to be kept secret. You might want to remain till the finish if this is your first time here. What's next? Okay, let's just say, nobody saw it coming. This isn't just a story. This is a narrative about black people. It was a Thursday afternoon in Beverly Hills, and the rooftop of Le Rêve, a 5-star fusion restaurant with tables that are hard to get and clients who spend millions of dollars, was full of people. It's the kind of location where people sign contracts over wine from other countries, and where your last name is more important than your last achievement. Addison Cole, the head of one of the most powerful tech empires in the US, was in the middle of negotiating a huge merger with a company in another country. A French investor in luxury goods is on his left. A Chinese AI billionaire and 2 German fintech veterans were sitting across from him. To his right, there was an empty chair till she got there. Zaria Monroe wasn't intended to be in the conversation. That was what they thought, at least. She worked as a server, young, black, nice, works well, and, to them, invisible. That is, till someone spoke French. Not well. One of the investors made a harsh, racist joke about her, thinking that only the others at the table would get it. Addison giggled and didn't even try to hide it. Then it was his turn, the one that made everything different. She probably only knows how to say hey and what's up. Zaria and he looked at each other. Steady. Not sorry. She moved forward a little bit. When she spoke, her voice wasn't angry. It was exact, beautiful, deadly. The table stopped moving. The power dynamics started to change one by one. And no one at that table, not Addison, not the French investor, not the rich Germans, realized that Zaria Monroe was more than simply a lovely waitress. She was a hurricane that needed to be understood, a voice that got sharper from living, a mind that was trained to speak more languages than most of them had ever heard spoken well. And this wasn't even the start of her story. So relax. Because what you're about to hear is the end of power, pride, and prejudice in 5 different languages. This is, can I help you translate that? And you're watching Hidden Worth. Please stay with us. Zaria Monroe didn't hurry. She used the quiet to her advantage. She owned it this time, just like it had been used against her for years. The French investor stared and then laughed in a confused way, evidently not knowing if he should be insulted or amused. Zaria carefully set the plate she had been carrying down on the side table, smoothed her apron, and spoke again, this time in German. Great. Shiny. Think about it. Ich kann das Dokument für Sie zusammenfassen, wenn Sie wollen. I can give you a quick summary of the document if you'd like. The group got a clear chill. The German partners moved closer. One lifted his eyebrows in astonishment, while the other nodded in approval, and then whispered something to the Frenchman. Zaria turned to the Chinese CEO and switched to fluent, tonal Mandarin. She spoke with the kind of casual elegance that comes from knowing the language well, not just memorizing words. Addison, who had been laughing till now, stood up straight. She wasn't doing a show. She was in charge. He looked around the table. Now, all of his important guests were looking at Zaria, not him. She had taken the spotlight without meaning to. She wasn't showy. She wasn't really loud. She just was a presence. And then, to show that it wasn't luck or a scripted remark, she took the translated contract from Addison's hand and said calmly, "This part here, page 7, uses the word market correction, but in Mandarin, it was more like market punishment." That could be why the deal felt hostile. The Chinese CEO nodded swiftly and said, "I agree." His interpreter, who was now absolutely confused, looked down at her notes. Zaria went on, speaking to each person in their own language, pointing out slight mistakes in phrasing, emphasizing cultural differences, and suggesting better ways to say things. At first, It was hard to see. After that, it became surgical. The German partners started to ask her questions directly. Auf Deutsch, she answered right away. The Frenchman questioned her about a legal phrase. She answered appropriately and even quoted EU economic law in her answer. The Chinese CEO pulled off his glasses, grinned, and stated in English, "She's the only one here today who makes sense." Addison's jaw got tight. This was more than just about language now. The table's vibe had changed completely. Every contract he had been trying to save. In barely 5 minutes, Zaria saved without even sitting down, and she didn't even raise her voice once. Addison Cole didn't feel like the most important person in the room for the first time in a long time. He felt outclassed, not by another billionaire, not by another CEO, but by the woman he had just made fun of, a server, a black woman who serves food. As the servers started to bring out dessert, Zaria picked up the contract that had been fixed and put it back in front of Addison. Her voice got a little lower. "I can print a clean copy if you want, or you could ask your assistant to prepare it for you, as long as they know how to format legal documents in more than one language." She just turned and went away. No dropping of the mic, don't smile, no pride, just peaceful and precise. Her heart was racing in the service hallway, but she kept going. She still had time to work. There were still tables to clean, coffee to pour, and tips to make. Addison sat quietly at the table on the roof, still holding the contract as if it had grown thorns. One of the Germans leaned down and remarked in a low voice, "You didn't say that your interpreter spoke more than one language." Addison said under her breath, "She's not my interpreter," and kept her eyes on the door she had just come through. "Well," the Frenchman said as he swirled his wine, "whoever she is, she's the reason I'm back on board." The CEO of China raised his glass. "To Miss Monroe, the individual at this table who is the smartest." Addison made herself grin politely. But something had changed in him as well. And it wasn't just being embarrassed. It was interest. He had established his empire by finding talented people early on and using them. But what about Zaria Monroe? She was unique. In a way that didn't make sense, they were untouchable. He grabbed his phone and typed her name into LinkedIn. Nothing at all. No degrees. No work experience. There was no sign of the woman who had just spared him from a calamity worth millions of dollars. That only made him more interested. Zaria leaned on the steel counter in the kitchen. One of the busboys looked at her. "Are you okay?" he asked. She slowly nodded. "Yeah," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "I'm doing great." But something else was going on deep within. Because things like this don't happen in her life. Not for women like her. Not 2 times. Unless something larger is on the way. And it was. She just didn't know it yet. Most of the guests had already forgotten about Zaria Monroe by the time her shift was over. But not Addison Cole. And especially not by the people in the restaurant who saw her enter peacefully through the side entrance with her apron neatly folded and her shoes bearing the quiet weight of someone who was used to being seen only when needed and not seen at all when not. But that wasn't the whole tale. Not even close. Zaria lived in a little studio apartment in Inglewood, on the 2nd story. There is no elevator. One window that was broken and made a whistling sound when the wind blew too hard, but it was hers and clean. She walked in quietly, put her bag down on the chair, and took off her shoes. Her feet hurt. Her back hurt. She didn't turn on the TV. Instead, she took a tiny wooden box off the top of her bookshelf. There were postcards inside, a lot of them. Edges that have lost their color, stamps from other countries. Each one has a different language on the back. Each one came from a place where she used to dwell. Zaria Monroe wasn't always a server. Her mother was a scholar who considered that the best thing a black girl could have was to be able to think, speak, and write fluently. They moved to much. Nigeria, France, Germany, Chile. Finally, the States. Zaria had learned how to speak like some kids learn how to play computer games. She could speak 5 languages well, and read 2 more by the time she was 16. "You'll never need a passport if your words can travel," her mother used to remark. Zaria graduated early from a top-tier linguistics program in the Midwest when she was 22. But no one came to see me. The interviews never led to job offers. The offers never led to jobs. Zaria's whole life fell apart when her mother died suddenly after a heart attack. She went to Los Angeles, by instinct, to run, to not remember. But the city didn't care how many languages you spoke or how talented you were. It didn't matter if your skin was brown and your bank account was empty. Her first employment was at a fancy hotel, as a housekeeper. Later, she moved up to the front desk. But if she said the wrong thing to a guest who crossed a line, she was out. No warnings, no hearings, gone. Le rêve happened then. A buddy of a friend has a cousin who quit in the middle of a shift. Zaria came, offered to work the floor that night, and stayed. She never told anyone about her past. Not the bosses, not the other servers, not the cooks. They called her Zed because she was quick, kind, and brilliant. The girl who always had an extra pen, the one who never said anything when the itinerary altered at the last minute. No one ever asked for more, and to be honest, that was okay with her. It was safer, because Zaria was good at the game. She had seen it happen in college hallways, corporate buildings, and even during job interviews when people were staring at her. People made choices about a black woman before she ever spoke. They didn't like her accent. They were confused by how well she spoke. Her smarts made them feel threatened. That made her smile, softly, all the time. The type that made people feel safe, a smile like the sun. But what about that smile? Was fire. Years of being ignored, of being told she was overqualified or not the right fit, of losing to candidates who were less experienced, less skilled, but more presentable. So she stopped trying to get attention. Up until now, up till that table, that remark, that time, when something inside her wouldn't let her go little again. She had been little for long enough. Zaria took out her old journal and turned to a page that was already worn. She had written a letter to her mother but never mailed it, in French, about how sick of pretending she was, about how much she missed being seen. She didn't read it tonight. She just sat there with it, hands on the paper, slowly breathing, paying attention to the silence. Addison Cole was still thinking about her somewhere in the city. But Zaria? She was thinking about what would happen next. And for the first time in a long time, the thought of more didn't seem like a dream. It seemed like a plan. Addison Cole had been to a lot of important meetings in his life. He had looked board members in the eye, stopped aggressive takeovers, and worked out billion-dollar deals on 5 continents. And yet, for the first time in a long time, he couldn't stop thinking about the waitress. Correction. A multilingual, poised, and razor-sharp woman who had just outsmarted 4 top executives at his own negotiation table. At the moment, he didn't know her name, just her voice, and her face. Zaria Monroe. That's what the restaurant manager said, almost against his will, when Addison came back the next day pretending to make a reservation for a private lunch. The manager seemed worried, perhaps because he feared Addison was going to complain. But he didn't say anything. He asked queries. The manager said she works part-time, stays to herself, always on time, not very social. It just works, in a quiet way, in a professional way. Addison thanked him and departed, but he was still curious. Addison sat at his kitchen counter with a drink of scotch and a laptop later that night in his high-rise condo that looked out over the city. He wrote, Zaria Monroe. Nothing important came up, no LinkedIn. There are no published papers. There was no social media that fit her image. Just one old picture from a university linguistics conference that happened 5 years ago. A hazy picture with the words, Zaria M. talks about accents and identity in the African diaspora. That was all. Addison looked at the television. This woman had gotten away with something in the system, and now she was bringing coffee to folks who wouldn't even look her in the eye. Why? He got more and more upset as he thought about it. Addison didn't think he was dumb. Yes, he was rich, had advantages as a child. But he wanted to think that he valued smart people, no matter where they came from. Still, when he thought back to that moment, the joke, the attitude, and the way he had laughed along it made his skin crawl. He had turned her down, just like everyone else. And she had taken the table apart with just words. He did something he hadn't done in years the next morning. He went on a walk. No one is driving, no help, no suit. Addison was wearing pants, sunglasses, and a hoodie. He walked through the streets of West L.A. till he got to the edge of Inglewood. He had no idea what he would find. He didn't have an address or any concrete leads, just a gut feeling. A pull. Then he spotted her. She was sitting outside a coffee shop on the corner with a paper cup in one hand and earbuds in the other. Still, made up, and completely impossible to read. He stared for a time, not knowing if he should go up to them. This wasn't work. This wasn't a plan. This was something else. Zaria looked up. They looked at each other. Her face stayed the same. Not a surprise, no irritation, just recognition. "You are following me now?" she said, with a calm voice and a slightly arched eyebrow. He raised his hands. "Not following, just walking." "Through Inglewood? In those shoes?" He laughed. "You got me. A break." She softly closed her journal and pulled out one earpiece. "What do you want?" "To talk." "About what?" Addison was unsure. This wasn't a meeting room. There were no buzzwords to use. "Finally," he said, "you. And how someone like you ends up getting made fun of by someone like me." Zaria looked at him. She didn't blink. "I've been asked worse things. But not with coffee most of the time." He stared at the cup she was holding. "What are you drinking?" "Black, no sugar." He turned around, went inside, and came back a few minutes later with his own cup. He sat across from her and copied her position without trying to. They didn't say anything for a while. Then she asked, "Why do you care?" That made him think. For a long time. He said, "Because I don't think I'm used to being outclassed. Especially not by someone who the world thinks doesn't matter." Zaria's face got a little less hard. No smile. Just less careful. "I used to matter," she whispered softly. "To whom?" "To everyone. Teachers, pupils, my mom." "What happened?" "That's a long story." "I have time." She stared at him for a long time before leaning back. She added, "Most people want to help you, or save you, or make you learn anything about yourself. You can't do that." He answered, "I'm not here to help you. I'm here to learn." Her lips were squeezed together in a narrow line. Then, she nodded once. "Okay then," she said. "But be careful. Sometimes the truth doesn't make you feel better." And at that time, they shared something that wasn't said. The waitress and the CEO. The man who is used to being noticed, and the genius who is not. Not really trust, but something close. For Addison Cole, this was no longer just a casual chat. It was the start of something that would change their lives forever. Zaria didn't often talk about her past with other people. A lot of folks didn't earn it. Most people didn't remain long enough to hear it. But there was something about Addison's eyes, steady, curious, but not intrusive, that made her stop. That is why she spoke. At first, quietly, with care. Like someone walking on broken glass with bare feet. "Once upon a time, I taught," she said. Addison looked up from his coffee, which he hadn't sipped yet. "Teach? Linguistics, at Oxford." He blinked in amazement. "As in the University of Oxford?" She nodded and looked out the window of the coffee shop to the horizon. "Yes, the one with the elegant towers and the people who think they're smarter than everyone else. There weren't many women of race in my department, perhaps the only one." Addison leaned back and listened. Zaria went on, her voice steady but with a harsh edge. "It started out tiny, talks and meetings. People asked me about my accent and invited me to panels where I was only requested to talk about diversity, not language. You learn to smile through it, to get through the kind of bias that lies under good manners." She took a drink of her coffee. But then came the night that changed everything. Her eyes moved, and suddenly they were far away. There was this older professor, honored, strong. Everyone wanted his advice. He had been nice for a time, too nice. Compliments that lasted too long, jokes that weren't really jokes. I laughed them off since I needed that letter, needed to get that paper out there, needed to keep my job. Addison's face got darker. One night after a conference dinner, he said he would walk me back to my apartment. I said no. He was adamant. Told me it wasn't safe. He said something I'll never forget after I turned him down again. Now she was looking right at Addison. "Miss Monroe, you should be careful. It's easy to find someone like you," she said in a calm voice. The next morning, an email went out to the department. I was being looked into for cheating in school since I was suspected of making up data in my research. Addison breathed out and tightened her jaw. Of course I battled it. I showed them everything. My work, my documents, and more. But the committee didn't care about facts. They wanted to keep their own safe. There was a small break in her voice. After 2 weeks, my office was empty. My access has been taken away. My name is on a blacklist at several universities. I turned into radioactive. The noise of cars and trucks filled the space between them. Finally, Addison said something. "You're saying they set you up," she said. "I'm saying that the truth didn't matter." The whisper did. Zaria leaned forward and put her hands on the table. "One accusation is all it takes to get you in trouble as a black woman in academia. You don't get the chance to defend yourself. You should leave without making a sound." Addison didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. She kept going. "I tried to put things back together. I applied for jobs in the United States. No one phoned back. My visa ran out. I went from going to conferences and writing scholarly papers to cleaning rooms at a hotel along the interstate." She laughed in a cruel way. "You know what's funny? I still couldn't quit translating, though. I would hear visitors arguing in Spanish or French and translate what they said in my brain. It kept me sane." Her fingertips ran down the edge of her coffee cup. "Then my mom passed away. Stroke. I didn't get home on time. Didn't even have enough money for the flight. The silence that came after was heavy. I kept the same notebook I used for my research," she remarked quietly. "But now it's full with grocery lists, poems, and little things I hear. That's all that's left of me." Addison's chest felt like it was twisting. He had spent his whole life turning ideas into empires. She had made sense of her life by staying alive. Finally, he added, "You didn't deserve that." She smiled a little. "Deserve doesn't signify much. Addison, the system isn't broken. It was made to be this way." He looked down, embarrassed that he hadn't said anything. Zaria got up and got her coat. "It's late. I need to leave." "Wait," he remarked as he pulled something out of his pocket. He took out a business card and slid it over the table. "If you ever need anything." She shook her head, stopping him softly. "I've had enough people try to assist. What I really need is to be noticed, not saved." And with that, she left. Addison saw her go along the street, her shadow lit up by the headlights of cars that passed by. He didn't see a waiter for the first time, or a victim. He recognized a narrative that needed to be told, and something told him he still had work to do with Zaria Monroe. Not yet. Addison didn't mean to keep coming back. That's what he told himself the first few times, at least. But gradually it changed into something else, something he couldn't entirely define, even to himself. He would make excuses. The office needs a place to have lunch with a client. Or maybe he just happened to be in the area. Or his driver, accidentally, turned the wrong way. But the truth was easier. He wanted her. Zaria. The woman with harsh words and gentle eyes who had every reason to loathe people like him but nevertheless spoke without anger. The lady who had been harmed by a system that had helped him all his life, yet, somehow, was still taller than anybody he knew. They ran into each other again outside a laundromat. Addison had gone for a walk after not being able to sleep. There is no security, no custom outfit. He was alone, wearing a hoodie, and had a lot of questions. There she was, folding shirts with the skill of someone who didn't have time to waste and listening to music. Her clothes were simple, useful, and clean. Her face was tranquil and hard to read. At first, he didn't say anything. He just leaned against the wall outside and pretended to be looking at his phone. She saw him in the glass and talked to him without turning around. "Day of laundry, billionaire?" He grinned. "You got me again." She folded a white shirt, put it in a bag, and then turned to face him. "You really don't know how to stay away, do you?" "Nope." Zaria's lips moved, almost like they were smiling, but not quite. "Are you hungry?" Addison blinked. "Are you asking me out?" "Not at all. I'm giving away leftovers. There's a diner on the street. You look like you didn't eat breakfast." He followed her, both amazed and amused. She walked quickly, didn't wait for permission, and didn't glance back. She was used to being by herself. The diner was small and outdated, with broken tiles and a jukebox that hadn't played since the 1990 seconds. They were in a booth by the window. She asked for coffee with no cream. He did the same thing. She took 2 foil packs out of her backpack, chicken that has been fried, cheese with macaroni, greens with collard greens. Addison lifted an eyebrow. "This looks amazing." "Yes, it is. Every Wednesday, Miss Luann makes food for the shelter. The best in South L.A. They were quiet while they ate. Addison then asked, "So, this is your place?" "One of them," I turn. "Less likely to be seen. Or aimed at." He frowned. "Targeted?" She looked at him knowingly. "When you're black and homeless, you can't hide. You have to deal with the load of suspicion." He nodded slowly. "I never thought of that." "Of course you didn't." Addison stopped. "That wasn't meant to be funny, was it?" She laughed softly. "No, only the truth." That was how their meetings went. Not expected, short, but always real. She was sitting on a bench near a playground reading Baldwin one day. Then she helped an older Vietnamese guy understand a letter from the DMV. He once witnessed her give her gloves to a woman in a wheelchair. They just gave them up without saying anything. Addison stopped planning his days so meticulously. He took the opportunity to stroll about in case he ran across her. They would sometimes talk about language, like how the meaning of a word changes depending on who says it. They talked about music from time to time. Zaria liked jazz, didn't like EDM, and adored 90 Seconds R&B. "I like songs that let me breathe," she once said. "Not ones that need attention." Addison didn't always know how to respond, but he paid attention, completely. No ego, no agenda. There was a change in him. This wasn't attraction. Or maybe it was, but not in the way people normally say it. This was a sign of respect. Respect. A steady flame of understanding that went beyond love and touched something deeper. He brought her a book on a dreary afternoon. A first edition of Toni Morrison, wrapped in brown paper. She opened it slowly, touched the back. It was closed. "I can't accept this," she said. "Why not?" "Too much." Addison turned to look at her. "Zaria, you can have nice things." She looked at him with a tense jaw. Then she put the book in her purse without saying anything. "Thank you," she murmured softly. He didn't go back to his condo that night. He drove instead. Past the center of town. Over the lights. He walked until he got to a place near the old overpass, where she had told him she slept in the winter. He stopped. Saturday let the quiet envelop around him, because he figured something out. He didn't need Zaria Monroe. Addison Cole, a billionaire, CEO, and headline maker, was starting to need her though. Not to make her better, but to discover himself. Everything changed on a Thursday. Addison didn't mean to stop by the bookstore. He used to go to a small, shabby store on Melrose when he needed some peace and quiet. But that afternoon, his car broke down. Yes, even millionaires have bad luck, and instead of waiting for his driver, he walked. The bell above the door rang, and there she was, Zaria. She sat cross-legged in the poetry aisle, paging through a dog-eared copy of Maya Angelou's Still I Rise. Her head was tilted and her lips were moving a little as she read. Before he could say anything, she looked up. "Are you following me now?" he said. "Just following fate." She rolled her eyes, but her smile gave her away. He sat between the shelves, across from her. No suits, no acting. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you said to me. About systems, strength, erasure." She raised an eyebrow. "And? I want to do something." Zaria squinted her eyes. "Like what? Give money to a charity? Give a talk?" He answered. "No. I want to use what I have to fix what I didn't see." She didn't respond right away, so he continued on going. "I looked into your case, in a quiet way. I have a team of lawyers looking at your firing records, the emails, the timelines." She got rigid. "You what?" I didn't make any noise. "I realize it's risky, but I had to find out." Her jaw got tight. "You didn't ask." "I know," he said. "I should have. Zaria, this isn't about me trying to save you. It's about my discovering that I've been part of a world that benefits from keeping voices like yours quiet." Zaria stood and walked about. "You think finding a few papers will make a difference?" He answered softly. "No. But it's a beginning, and it's not just you anymore." He took a folder out of his bag. There were names within. A lot of them. Teachers. People who are active. Just like her. Professionals who had been forced out, maligned, or silenced. I started to looking really hard. And I saw that you weren't an oddity. You're a pattern. Zaria grasped the folder slowly, and her hands shook a little. "I don't want to be the face of your revolution," she added. Addison said, "I don't need a face. I need a partner, someone who can make anything actual." The stillness between them was weighty and full of meaning. Then she said something that surprised him. "I had a dream about my old classroom last night." He blinked. Whiteboard, chalk dust, and my favorite mug on the desk. I woke up with a smile on my face. Then I remembered that I haven't held a textbook in 3 years. Addison watched her, and the heaviness of her words sank into his chest. He said, "You're still a teacher. That never left you." Zaria looked at the folder again. "Why now, Addison? Why me?" "Because you're the first person in a long time who has made me stop talking and listen." That made her chuckle, although it wasn't loud. She closed the folder and gave it back. "Okay," she finally said. "Do you want to do something? Let's do something real now." He nodded. They left the bookstore together, walking side by side. That night, they sat at a rented desk in the back of an old community center with their laptops open and documents spread out. Zaria wrote down her ideas on a whiteboard. These included language access programs, mentorship networks, and legal help for professionals of color. They were making something, not giving, not a publicity stunt, but a foundation based on fairness. It didn't make things better in the past, but it started to change the future. And at that moment, with the sound of a dusty ceiling fan in the background, something big changed. Not only in their story, but in the stories of everyone who had been deleted, silenced, or forgotten. It was no longer about staying alive. It was about leaving a legacy. And for the first time, Zaria let herself think that maybe, just maybe, she still had one to create. An old email was the first sign of trouble. It was buried in a university archive, behind a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. Addison's lawyers found it through a backdoor request, which was a digital paper trail that had almost been lost to time. There was nothing complicated about the subject line. Concerns about Z, Monroe. But what are the contents? Full of secret language. Words like emotional, hard to handle, and unpredictable never came up in her teaching evaluations, but they did when Zaria started to fight back against department policy. She had asked about differences in hiring, called out unfair funding, challenged guest speaker lists that left out people of color. And not long after, the whispers began. She doesn't get along with others. She makes meetings awkward. Maybe she's not stable. At 2 a.m., Addison sat at his dining room table and read through his emails. His hands shook with a mix of wrath and guilt, because he was sure of what had transpired. Zaria Monroe did not lose her good name. She was pushed. He called her the next day. "I have something you need to see." She didn't ask anything. She only said, "I'll be there in 30. They gathered at a quiet co-working location that they had hired under a fake identity. Addison put the printouts out. A lot of them. Memos for the office. Notes from the faculty meeting. References that aren't blacked out. One of them was especially bad. There was a private email exchange between the dean and a trustee, who just so happened to be on the board of Addison's company at the time. The note said, "If she keeps pushing this equity thing, we might have to make it a performance issue. If not, she's going to make our public relations a lot worse." Zaria looked at the text, not blinking, not moving, just taking it all in. "Is this what you've been digging up?" she inquired quietly. He nodded his head. "There's more. Part of it has to do with how they got you fired. They utilized complaints from students who didn't give their names. But what about the complaints? All of them were written in the same font. Same patterns of grammar." Zaria sat down hard, as if her knees finally gave her. "Do you get what this means?" she whispered. Addison responded, "They planned your fall. On purpose. Strategically. They were quiet for a long time. After that, she spoke again. They called me angry because I wouldn't let it go. They said I was unstable because I wouldn't be pleasant. They got rid of me. And they thought that no one would ever look back." Addison leaned in. "We're looking now." They labored in quiet and anger for the next 2 weeks. They made a timeline. Dates that matched. Reports that are cross-referenced. I talked to some of my old co-workers who at first didn't want to talk, but once they saw how serious Addison was, they started telling the truth. One adjunct said he heard the department head make a joke about getting rid of the loud one. Another said that they were pushed to change a neutral rating into a negative one. One brave admin assistant gave out a USB stick. On it, files with sound, talking in private, recordings of faculty meetings where Zaria's name came up a lot as a problem to be fixed. Addison didn't want her to hear them, but Zaria wouldn't let her. And when she did, she didn't cry. She made fists. She wrote things down, and she said softly, "They thought they broke me, but they made something else instead." Word started to get around, albeit not very quickly at first. Addison's journalist friend wanted to know if the stories were genuine. Addison said 2 words back, "Not yet," because they weren't ready yet. Not until every stone had been turned over. Not until Zaria was ready to talk. And when that time came, it wouldn't be behind closed doors. It would be in front of every school that tried to get rid of her. And it would be quite loud. It was colder than normal in the boardroom. Maybe it was the polished glass table that seemed to go on forever, or the fact that everyone seated around it looked the same, tight-lipped, well-dressed, and obviously uncomfortable. Addison recognized that look. It was the way males showed their power, and all of a sudden feeling it slide away. He came in by himself. No help, no safety, no script. He held only a leather folder in his hand, and Zaria's voice rang in his head. "Say it plain, say it loud. Don't you dare move." "Mr. Cole," one of the directors said, "this emergency meeting was called because something very worrying happened." He nodded. "I thought so." Another director cleared her throat. "Is it true that you've been looking into a former college professor who is connected to a board member? Using company time? Company resources?" Addison said, "It's true. Calm down. Understood. And I have the results with me today." There was a pause. No pen moved at all. Addison put the folder on the table and opened it cautiously. The transcripts were within, the notes, the messages, the proof. He said, "This board has a problem, and it all starts with Henry Chambers." Everyone looked at the man 3 seats to the left. Chambers' face was like stone. Addison went on to say, "Henry used his power at DuPont University to ruin the career of a young black professor named Zaria Monroe. Not because she wasn't good at her job, but only because she stood up to the old guys club. Because she said something." Someone responded in a stern voice, "That's a serious accusation." Addison said, "I don't deal in accusations. I deal in proof. And I have a lot of it. Meetings that were recorded, changed assessments, emails linking this board member to the school's decision to silence a bright teacher." Chambers eventually spoke, but his voice was tight. "She wasn't stable, causing trouble. That's on the record." Addison stepped up and said, "No. What's on the record is that she asked you about your recruiting methods. She pushed for fair funding. And you responded by making up complaints, changing papers, and putting her on a blacklist in every academic circle you could find. Be quiet. Not comfortable. Tense." A few people on the board looked at each other. Addison kept going, and it would have stayed buried. "But you made a mistake. You thought that no one would ever look back. But I did. And now the whole globe will." One of the newer members of the board leaned in, their brows wrinkled. "This is a lot, Addison. You know that making this public could hurt our shareholders, our name, our leaders." Addison looked him in the eye. "That's exactly why it needs to happen. If we are the kind of firm that protects men like Chambers and buries women like Zaria, then maybe the brand should burn." Gasped. Chambers abruptly got up. "You think this makes you a hero? She's just a waitress now." Addison's eyes got smaller. "She speaks 5 languages fluently and is a linguist. A former professor who has won academic distinctions in 3 different nations. And indeed, she was a waitress until she saved $1 million contract with just 1 sentence. She is more than you will ever be." There was a lot of tension in the room. Chambers tried to leave, but the chairwoman stopped him. "Henry, sit down." She spoke in a chilly voice. "Last." She looked at Addison. "Are you quitting then?" He nodded. "This business can keep its board or it can keep its honesty, not both." He put his letter of resignation on the table. "And if any of you think that keeping quiet is safer than telling the truth, then you're part of the problem." Addison didn't say anything else and just went out. The hallway seemed brighter, less heavy. His heart raced, but not because he was scared. He was free. Zaria was outside, leaning against the marble wall with her arms folded. "How did it go?" "I burned the bridge," he added. She smiled. "Good. Now let's make something they can't help but notice." And at that moment, when they stepped into the brightness of a new chapter, neither of them glanced back. This wasn't about getting back at someone. It was time to face the music, and it had only begun. The day following the fight in the boardroom, the city felt different. Not louder or busier, it always buzzed. It was just more alert. The kind of awake that comes after a storm, when everything was clean for a short while. Addison stood outside a small cafe and bookstore in Brooklyn, holding a coffee cup in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. Zaria was already there. Her hair was pulled back today, and she wore a beautiful maroon sweater that hugged her shoulders. She was tapping a pen against a closed notepad. She seemed still and calm, but there was something behind her gaze. Not very guarded, not nearly open, just watching. He came in. Before he could say anything, she said, "You look like you haven't slept." He said, "I haven't." "You?" "Same." They smiled at each other, but their eyes didn't quite meet. A quiet acceptance that every win comes with a cost. Addison said, "I did it. I left. Officially." Zaria nodded slowly. "I thought so. The press has already phoned me twice." He sat down across from her and put the envelope on the table. "This is what I wanted to talk about." She thought about it. What is it? A plan, a thought, a way to make all of this into anything, forever. She took the envelope out of her pocket. There were papers, drawings, grant plans, and partnership proposals within, all with the same title in big letters at the top, the Zaria Foundation. "I want to make something," he remarked. "A center, an actual space. For those like you, people who have been deleted, not true, brilliant voices that were silenced because they spoke too clearly." She carefully and slowly looked through the pages. Her face was blank. He went on to say, "I'm not asking you to be the face of it. I'm asking if you'd do it." Her head went up. "What?" "You. Not as a sign, not as a name. As the boss, as the person who came up with it. You've been through it. Made it through. You know what this area needs to be." Zaria let out a breath. "Addison, this is a big deal. I know. It's dangerous. You're putting your name and future on someone the world still doesn't know how to define. Then let's redefine it," he added. "On your terms." She was silent. There was a lot of activity in the cafe. Baristas called out names. The music was quiet. The world kept going, just like it always had. "I told myself I would never go back," she remarked at last. "Don't ever build something just to see it fall apart." "But what if this time?" Addison replied softly. "You have the plans? The money? The strength?" Again, she looked down at the papers. The rooms are drawn out. The scholarships that were talked about. The language labs. The programs for mental health. The Center for Integrating Refugees. Everything was constructed around one idea. Put dignity first. Her fingertips halted on a page that showed a mock-up of the building's entrance. It said, Zaria Foundation. For the brilliant, the silenced, the unseen. She gulped down. "You really believe this?" Addison said, "I believe in you. I saw you save a deal with only one sentence. I saw you teach under a tree with no whiteboard, no compensation, and more authority than a room full of CEOs. You can lead this if anyone can." Another break. Then Zaria said, "Okay," in a low voice. He blinked. "Okay, I'll do it," she said, "but only if." "Say it. This isn't just my place. It's for everyone. So it won't only have my name on it. We give it a name together. We work together to construct it, and we do everything we can to keep it safe." Addison truly smiled for the first time that morning. "Deal." She shook his hand across the table. There was no ceremony. There weren't any cameras. No press. Two people are putting back together what the world tried to break down. And this time, they didn't need to seek for permission. The world appeared different 6 months later. Not because the economy improved, the skyline altered, or the news got any better. But Zaria Monroe was no longer unseen. The center was on the border of Harlem, in a brownstone that had been renovated into a lively place. The walls are a warm yellow, the windows are broad, and there is a big painting on the side of the building with faces of all shades and ages looking up. It didn't scream luxury, but it did have a purpose, and Zaria's fingerprints were all over it. In every hallway, the music of new beginnings rang. A language class was laughing, tapping keys in the computer lab, young women whispering to each other in the reading room. Zaria stood with her arms folded in the main office and watched everything. She donned a black blazer that fit her well, simple gold earrings, and a pair of sneakers that she never took off. There were a lot of notes, books, and coffee cups on her desk. A big sign behind her said, "The Haven, powered by truth, led by the quieted." It wasn't easy. The first 3 months almost killed her. There were bureaucratic problems, zoning problems, fundraising problems, and more than a few evenings when she wondered if it was all just a dream made up of trauma and hope. But then the doors swung open, and people showed up. At first, they arrived silently, unsure, not sure if the promise was real. But they stayed anyhow, because it was. Addison also kept his word. He didn't just give money, he also came, gave up their time, let Zaria take the lead and sit back. Some people in the news said he was a fallen CEO seeking for a way to make things right. He didn't tell them they were wrong, because this was no longer about him. One afternoon, a little child pulled on Zaria's arm as she walked down the corridor. "Miss Zaria," he replied, showing her a picture. "Is this how you spell brave?" She gazed at the letters Kourij that were written with a crayon. "Almost," she said with a smile as she knelt down. "You're just one letter away." He smiled, rushed back to class, and left her standing there with her palm over her heart. Bravery. She had almost forgotten what it was like to be appreciated for more than just surviving. Zaria lingered late that night after everyone else gone. The hallways were empty. The building was lit up by soft lamps and music from a youth program that had ended hours before. She sat down at her desk, opened her journal, and stared at a blank page. Then she said, "I watched someone think they were important today. That's all." The door made a noise. Addison came in with 2 takeout boxes and a smile on her face. "You look like you missed dinner again." "I got caught up," she remarked, pointing to the journal. "Words don't feed you," he said as he gave her the food. "They did before," she said. "Now they remind me that I'm still here." They sat across from each other and ate in silence. Addison added, "Next week is going to be huge. Between nibbles, the dinner for the foundation, press, givers, graduates, a few politicians too." Zaria rolled her eyes. "Sounds like a lot of work." "Yes, but necessary. These rooms don't stay open for poems." She nodded. "I'll be ready." He gazed at her with a serious face. "You know, you're not the same person I met at the restaurant." She stopped for a moment. "Okay. No," he said with a smile. "Not good. Great." She leaned back. "I still think about that night. The pain, the shame, but also the moment I decided to get up and talk. That was the day I began to rewrite my story." "And now?" he asked. "What?" "Now I'm not just writing mine," she remarked. "I'm also helping other people find their voice." There was a silence between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full. The type that only comes after you've been hurt, healed, and come back stronger. Addison held up his soda glass. "To new beginnings." Zaria picked hers up. "To never be invisible again." They clinked their glasses together, and in the calm of the haven, where hope was sewn into every wall, the restart of a life of many lives went on, louder than ever. A year to the day. It has been a year since that envelope slipped across the table at a coffee shop and impacted the lives of 2 people, and maybe more. The morning sun shone down on the city, giving a new building the look of a promise. Glass and steel are softened by warm touches of salvaged wood and murals painted by local artists. There were big letters on the front, "Revive," the Center for Renewal and Reclamation. The vibe inside was electric. People in matching blue t-shirts rushed back and forth. Beside the registration booths were tall flower displays. There was laughter coming from the courtyard where kids were playing near the community garden. A jazz quintet played a few songs to get ready near the stage. Zaria Monroe stopped, still just inside the main lobby. She was poised, grounded, and dazzling. She wore a plain navy dress and had her hair in beautiful curls. On her lapel was a silver pin that looked like an open book. Her eyes took in every little thing, not with worry, but with ownership. She had put all of her energy into these walls, all of the hallways, all of the doors, everyone and everything involved in the program. Addison came up stealthily from behind. "Are you nervous?" he inquired. She shook her head. "I've been through worse." He grinned. "Yes." Zaria turned to look at him. "This place, it's bigger than me now. It's about all the voices who never received a second chance. This is for them. He nodded. And you? She responded softly. No. Because of them. At 10 in the morning. As soon as it got sharp, people started to assemble outside. There were hundreds of individuals there, including students, teachers, activists, artists, former co-workers, doubters, and believers. And even some reporters with cameras already rolling. The ceremony to cut the ribbon was about to start. Zaria walked up to the podium, where a microphone was waiting. The noise of the city stopped for a time. Then she said something. I recall the time I was quiet. It didn't matter what people thought they observed about my degrees, my languages, or my thoughts. A waitress, a woman of color, not seen. Throw away. People in the crowd were whispering. But I also recall when someone heard me, not out of pity, not to help me, but to really listen to me. She stared at the faces. Some of them cried, others stayed still and held their breath. And that time turned into this one. This building. This dream. A place not for the lost, but for the rising. Where experience is just as important as a diploma. Where the obliterated are brought back. Where voices aren't just heard. They're amplified. The applause grew like a tsunami. Addison stood to the side, proud but not trying to take the spotlight. He realized that this moment wasn't his. It was never. Zaria went on. We dubbed it Revive because sometimes just living isn't enough. We need to be brought back to life sometimes, not just for the body, but for respect, for hope, for strength. She took a step back. The crowd went wild. A girl from the youth program brought over a pair of scissors with gold handles. Zaria and the daughter cut the ribbon together. The doors swung wide open. The official start of Revive had come. Every room within was full of life. A digital skills lab, where young folks learn how to use career tools. A community kitchen that teaches people how to make food last longer for free. Therapy rooms that offer trauma-informed counseling in more than one language. And there was a library in the back. There are books from every continent on the shelves, speaking more than one language. Open, with skylights for light. In the middle of the building was a tree, not a real tree, but a sculpture made of scrap metal and glass, with a trunk that twists up, 5 words carved into 20 languages around it. Do you need help translating that? The phrase that started it all. That changed a moment of ridicule into a movement with purpose. Later that afternoon, as guests were walking around the halls, Zaria sought a quiet place on the second-floor balcony. She saw the city spread out below her. The cars moved, people went by, life went on. But now she wasn't peering in from the outside. She was putting it together. A girl came up with a notebook in her hand. Excuse me, are you Miss Monroe? Zaria turned around. I am. I'm writing a piece for my school newspaper about today. I just wanted to know what Revive means to you. Zaria stopped. Then they smiled. It means they couldn't get rid of me. And they won't delete you either. The envelope for the invitation was so basic that it didn't stand out. But Zaria Monroe understood right away whose initials were in the corner. H.C. Henry Chambers, the man who helped plan her death. She looked at the envelope on the kitchen counter in her Harlem apartment. The metropolis went on and on outside the window, with cars, distant horns, and lights flashing at nightfall. It was the same city where she used to feel like no one could see her. She would take that area back tonight. Addison's hand was on her shoulder. Are you ready? She nodded. They went to the event together, which was a symposium on fairness in higher education, held at DuPont University's downtown campus. Henry Chambers was currently on the board of a steel and ambition tower. The seats in the auditorium filled up fast under the cold white lights. Former students, university administrators, students of color, and reporters. The air was full of excitement. Zaria looked across the rows. Henry Chambers sat there, third from the front. His body was stiff, as if he had been privileged for decades. His tie was just right. His face was blank. She wasn't scared, just clarity. The moderator started the session. Then they introduced Zaria Monroe, the main speaker. Clapping. She moved forward. People took pictures. Her heart relaxed into its rhythm. Zaria's voice was steady and serene. When a system fails someone, she remarked, it doesn't only break them. It makes a lot of people quiet. It shows other people how to hide, to get smaller, to see invisibility as safety. She stopped and took a breath. But what if someone stands anyway? Henry moved around in his chair. She told her story. The languages she knew well, the talks she gave, the praise that went away overnight, the investigation that never really happened, the job that went away, the visa that ran out. She didn't talk with rage. She spoke clearly. She glanced straight at Henry Chambers after 30 minutes. You called me disruptive once, not stable, a danger. You acted like telling the truth was a crime. You made up a story about me because I asked too many questions. I didn't push back enough, and you believed you could kill me. Henry's face stayed blank. But burying me didn't make me quiet. It taught me how to plan, strength, vision. She pointed to the crowd. Dozens of individuals strolled past me in this space while I was carrying boxes, serving tables, and making coffee. They didn't notice me. You didn't see me, because you didn't want to. The quiet went on and on. She stepped down at the conclusion. The crowd stood up and clapped. Henry stayed in his seat. Addison and Zaria retreated to a side hallway after the occurrence. Henry went out the front doors. Zaria caught up to him right as he got to his car. Mr. Chambers, she said. He came to a stop, partially lowered window, the cool evening air on his face. She leaned in. Be calm, she whispered softly. You don't owe me anything, but you owe a lot of us an answer. He turned his head away. Then he looked her in the eye. I see you, he whispered softly. That would be enough, she said. And she kept going. Henry was in the driver's seat behind her, and the car's engine was humming. For most people, his world was the same. But for him, something had changed. She shut the door later that night at Zaria's office at Revive. Addison was there, going over the grant papers. He whispered softly. You did it. It's not done, she said. But you stood up to him. She nodded. I fought the system. He grinned. And you didn't fall apart. She sat down at her desk. The twisted metal tree sculpture in the entryway stood out in her mind. She added, we didn't come here to win nicely. We're here to rewrite. Addison rested against the desk. What's next? Zaria grabbed a picture in a frame. The youth class from last year had kids with big smiles, bright shoes, and papers with languages on them. Now, she concluded, we build it so no one ever has to feel erased again. She got up, went to the window. The lights of the city sparkled. And for you? She asked him. For me? He stopped for a second. I learned what it means to pay attention. She turned around. That's how things start to change. The automobile drove away outside. Henry Chambers departing a structure that used to mean victory for him. The lights stayed on inside. At night, Revive lit up. A sign. A time to pay. And the next chapter is waiting to be written. The last lecture of the night was meant to be short. Just a last thought. Thanks. A quote or two might help. But as Zaria walked onto the stage at the Revive Center that night, the room got quiet for reasons that no one could entirely explain. It wasn't only that she was there, or that she walked like someone who had already fought every war and still chose peace. It was something else, something more serious. She stood at the podium. No script. There is no teleprompter. Only her voice. She started by saying, when I was 10, my grandmother told me that words are the sharpest tools we have. That they can break the stillness. Through lies. Through everything that was supposed to keep us down. She looked around the room and saw young leaders, volunteers, local officials, and people who were still putting their lives back together, just like she had to do. She said, a lot of people think I lived because I'm smart, or because I could speak 5 languages. But none of that mattered when I was called a name. When the system turned its back, none of it could help me. A break, soft and on purpose. Language didn't save me. People chose to see me even when I had nothing to give. People that listened and didn't try to fix me. People who stayed when I had nothing to offer. Zaria left the podium and walked to the front of the stage. I used to think that success meant showing everyone that they were incorrect. Now I realize it means proving the people who believed in you before you believed in yourself right. There was silence again, profound and echoing. She went on. I don't speak 5 languages to impress anyone anymore. I speak them because someone, somewhere, needs to be understood, and they should be able to speak the language they dream in. She grinned. Today, I want to give you 5 words that changed everything for me. She raised her hand and clearly said them in every language she knew. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. The crowd stood up. Like the tide, it rises slowly. There wasn't a lot of applause at first, just being there. Quiet. Then the sound got louder. Claps, thanks, a few tears. Addison stood in the back with her arms crossed and her eyes steady. He looked proud, not because she had done well, but because of how she handled it. Shut up. Earned. Zaria sat on the steps outside the center after the ceremony. The air was fresh. She had her hair pushed up and her jacket on her shoulders. A girl, who was only 16, stepped over and sat down next to her. The girl said, "I didn't know people like me could talk like that." Zaria stared at her. People like us can do more than just talk. We can be in charge. We can change it all. The girl thought for a moment. What if nobody hears? Zaria grinned. Then talk louder, or more gently, or in a language they have never heard before. But don't ever stop talking. The girl nodded her head. Then they stood, went into the city at night. Zaria stayed in her seat, watching the streetlights and the people who live there. This was the true change. Not yelling, not going up fast, but staying, making, turning agony into a reason to live. She took out her phone, accessed the Hidden Worth Channel app, and started typing. To everyone who is listening, our stories are important. Our voices are important. No matter how quiet or loud you are, don't let the world forget you. Share this tale if it made you feel something. Like, sign up, be the reason someone is heard, and always remember that every voice has value, even the ones that are hidden. She pushed the button to publish, and somewhere, someone would find it on a screen that was dark, and maybe, just maybe, it would change everything.